The ranch garden in Jackson Hole was glowing with soft lights when I arrived, the kind that make everything look prettier than it really is. White flowers lined the path, expensive ones I could not name, flown in from somewhere warm and polished. A string quartet played near the fountain, their music floating over the hum of voices and laughter. Everyone looked relaxed, confident, dressed like they belonged in this world. I felt like I had stepped into someone else's life by mistake. My name is Layla. I am 31 years old, and I manage Whitmore Ridge Ranch, the land my dad and mom left behind when they passed. Tonight I was not here as the ranch manager. I was here as the younger sister of the bride, Marianne, my sister, the woman who used to braid my hair when we were kids, who used to swear she would always protect me. Standing in that garden, I realized how long it had been since I last felt like her sister, instead of a distant relative she tolerated out of obligation. The guests were mostly people from the city, Denver, Boulder, places where people talk fast and measure success in promotions and square footage. I recognized almost no one. Their conversations floated past me. Real estate, investments, travel plans. Someone laughed about traffic like it was a shared trauma. I adjusted my dress, something simple and modest, nothing flashy. I had chosen it carefully, hoping not to stand out. But the truth was, I stood out anyway. Not because of what I wore, but because of where I came from. The ranch life clung to me in ways I could never wash off. I paused near the edge of the crowd and took a slow breath. If you are listening to this right now, I wonder where you are. Maybe you are folding laundry driving home, or sitting with a cup of coffee that has gone cold without you noticing. For me, I was standing under the Wyoming sky surrounded by strangers, about to lose something I did not even know could be taken from me. Marianne looked beautiful. I will give her that. Her dress was elegant, fitted perfectly, the kind you see in magazines. Her hair was swept up, every strand in place. She looked calm, almost regal, like she had finally become the woman she always wanted to be. Standing beside her was Caleb Rourke, her groom, tall, well-dressed, confident in that quiet way men get when they believe everything is already under their control. He did not smile much, but when he did, it was practiced, measured. The kind of smile that says, I know exactly what I am doing. I watched them from a distance, unsure when or if I should approach. I did not want to interrupt. I did not want to cause a scene. All I wanted was to stand there, watch my sister get married, and leave quietly. That was the plan I had rehearsed in my head the entire drive over. It did not work out that way. Marianne noticed me before I noticed her looking at me. I felt at first that sudden awareness of being watched. When our eyes met, something shifted in her expression. Not surprising. Not warmth, something harder. She excused herself from a group of guests and walked toward me. Her steps quick and precise. Caleb followed a few paces behind, silent as ever. She stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something sharp and expensive. She did not ask how I was. She did not hug me. She looked straight into my eyes and said, apologize or get out. We don't want you here. The words landed heavy like a slap I could not block. For a second, I honestly thought I had misheard her. The music kept playing. Laughter bubbled up somewhere behind us. Glasses clinked. Life continued as if nothing had just happened. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Apologize for what? The question formed in my head, but it never made it past my lips. Caleb stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her lower back. He did not say a word. He did not need to. His presence was enough. He looked past me, over my shoulder, like I was already gone. I felt the heat rise in my face. Every conversation around us seemed to fade, replaced by the sound of my own heartbeat. I could feel eyes turning toward us, curious, hungry. I knew what they were seeing. The awkward sister. The problem. The one who could not quite fit into the picture. I searched Marianne's face for some sign that this was a mistake. A misunderstanding we could clear up quietly. There was nothing. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were cold. This was not impulsive. This was a decision. Apologize or get out. We don't want you here. I still did not know what I was supposed to be apologizing for. Staying on the ranch. Not selling. Not moving to the city. Being who I was. All of it ran through my mind at once. Years of unspoken tension condensed into one cruel sentence. I could have argued. I could have asked her to explain herself. I could have reminded her of everything we had been through. Dad taught us how to ride. Mom packing our lunches for school. the nights after they were gone, when it was just the two of us and the house felt too big and too quiet. I could have said all of that. Instead, I did nothing. I nodded once, a small movement almost polite. I turned away before she could say anything else. Before I could say something I might regret, I picked up my purse from the chair where I had set it down and walked toward the exit. No one stopped me. That was the part that hurt the most. As I passed through the garden, conversations paused, then resumed. I felt their eyes on my back, felt myself shrinking under their judgment. By the time I reached the parking lot, my hands were shaking. I fumbled with my keys, the metal cold against my skin. I sat in my truck for a moment, staring at the steering wheel, breathing in short, uneven bursts. I did not cry. Not yet. The drive back to the ranch was quiet. The road stretched out in front of me, familiar and comforting in a way nothing else was that night. The lights of the venue disappeared in my rearview mirror, replaced by darkness and open land. I rolled down the window and let the cool air hit my face. It helped me breathe. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. I turned off the engine and sat there listening to the night sounds. Crickets, wind moving through the trees. The ranch was exactly as I had left it. Steady, unchanged, waiting. I went inside and kicked off my shoes. I set my purse on the table and leaned against the counter, finally letting the weight of the evening sink in. I thought about Dad, about how he used to say that land remembers who cares for it. I wondered what he would have said if he had seen what happened tonight. I wondered if he would have told me to fight, or if he would have told me to walk away just like I did. Lying in bed later, staring at the ceiling, I replayed Marianne's words over and over. Apologize or get out. We don't want you here. Each time they cut a little deeper. I realized something then, something I did not want to admit. This was not just about a wedding. It was about who belonged and who did not. When my phone buzzed on the nightstand, I ignored it. Whatever came next could wait until morning. I closed my eyes, knowing that today had changed something between my sister and me that might never fully heal. And as sleep finally crept in, I had no idea that this was only the beginning. That thought followed me through the house like a shadow I could not shake. I lay there a long time listening to the quiet settle into the walls. The kind of quiet you only get out here when the wind slows down and the animals have finally stopped stirring. The ceiling fan turned with a soft clicking sound, steady and familiar. But my mind refused to match it. Every time I started to drift, I saw my sister's face again. I heard her voice again. I felt the heat of embarrassment crawl up my neck again. I got up before sunrise, not because I was rested, but because staying in bed felt like losing. The floorboards were cold under my feet. I pulled on an old sweatshirt that still smelled faintly like cedar from the closet, then walked into the kitchen and switched on the light over the sink. The bulb flickered once before it steadied, and the yellow glow filled the room. I put on the kettle, and while it heated, I stood at the window and watched the first gray hint of morning touch the far ridge. Whitmore Ridge Ranch does not wake up all at once. It comes alive in pieces. A distant gate creaks. A bird calls from the cottonwoods by the creek. Somewhere behind the barn, a horse shifts and snorts like he is clearing his throat. I have always loved that. It feels like the land is stretching, getting ready for the day. Some people wake up to traffic and sirens. I wake up to breathing animals and the open sky. When the kettle started to hiss, I poured hot water into my mug and dropped it in a tea bag. Coffee would have made my stomach too tight. Tea was gentler. I sat at the kitchen table, the same worn wooden table my mom used to polish with lemon oil on Sundays, and I let the heat warm my hands. The house smelled like tea and old pine. It smelled like home. I should have been furious. I should have been calling my sister and demanding an explanation. I should have been replaying every wrong thing she ever did, until the anger finally burned clean. But what I felt most was something softer and worse, a hollow ache, like grief but without the finality. Like I had lost someone who was still walking around out there, laughing for strangers, choosing a life that did not include me. I looked at the hook by the back door where my ranch keys always hung. They were on a simple ring, nothing fancy. A couple of brass keys and one heavier one with an old worn head. I grabbed them the way I always did without thinking, and slid them into my pocket. Just a habit. Just part of getting dressed for the day. I did not pause to admire them or assign them meaning. They were just keys. They opened what needed opening. Outside, the air had that sharp Wyoming bite that wakes you up fast. The gravel crunched under my boots as I walked toward the barn. The barn roof cut a dark shape against the lighter sky, and the smell hit me as soon as I opened the door. Hay leather dust animals. I breathed it in and felt my shoulders drop a fraction. This place has always been honest with me. It never pretended. It never smiled sweetly and then turned its back. If a fence was broken, it was broken. If a horse was hungry, he made sure you knew it. I fed the chickens first. They rushed the gate like I was late, and they had been starving for a week. Their little feet scratched at the dirt and they clucked loudly, indignant. I scattered feed and watched them go quiet as they started pecking. Then I carried a bucket of grain to the horses. Dakota, my older mare, pressed her nose into my shoulder as soon as I stepped into her stall. Her breath was warm and damp against my cheek. I scratched behind her ear the way she likes, and she leaned into it. "You are the only one in this house who never makes me feel unwanted." I murmured, and I almost laughed at myself for saying it out loud. As I worked, my mind kept sliding backward, even when I tried to keep it in the present. It was like my hands knew what to do, but my heart was still standing in that wedding garden, staring at my sister as if she were a stranger. When Dad died, I was young enough that the word forever still felt theoretical. People say it all the time. Forever love, forever family, forever home. Dad's death was the first time I understood forever means you do not get them back. He was gone in 2012, and I remember the morning after the funeral. More than I remember the funeral itself. The house was too quiet. The coffee pot was cold. Dad's boots were still by the door, muddy, like he might walk in and scold me for tracking dirt across the kitchen floor. Mom tried so hard to hold us together. She kept routines like they were life rafts. Dinner at 6, even if none of us were hungry. Laundry on Saturdays. Church on Sundays. Even when she looked like she wanted to crawl under the pew and sleep for a year, she would stand at the sink washing dishes, staring out the window at the pasture where Dad used to ride, and her eyes would go glassy. When she noticed me watching, she would blink fast and give me a smile that did not quite land. "We will be okay, sweetheart," she would say. "We have each other, but grief is not a straight line, and it does not care how badly you want things to be okay." Mom lasted 2 more years. 2 years of pushing herself too hard, of carrying weights no one should carry alone. She went in 2014, and the day we got the call, Marianne did not cry. She just went very still, like a door had slammed shut inside her. I cried enough for both of us. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, my phone in my hand, feeling like I was falling through air. After Mom, the ranch became something different to each of us. To me, it was the last living piece of Dad and Mom. It was where their hands had touched things that still existed. The porch rail Dad repaired, the garden Mom planted, the fence posts they painted together, the land that held all our memories, good and bad, like layers in the soil. To Marianne, the ranch became a weight around her ankle. She started talking about Denver almost immediately, like the city was a rope she could grab to pull herself out of the grief. She wanted noise and lights and people who did not know our history. She wanted fresh air that did not smell like hay and dust. She wanted to stop being the girl everyone pitied in town. I remember one night not long after Mom. We were sitting on the porch wrapped in blankets. The stars were so bright they looked close enough to touch. I told Marianne I was thinking about staying at least for a while, to keep the place running. I expected her to be relieved. Instead, she turned her face away from me and said she could not breathe here anymore. "This ranch is a graveyard," she said, her voice tight. "Every corner is them. Every room is a reminder. I need to get out before it swallows me whole." I did not know what to say. I understood her pain. I did. But I also felt something sharp twist inside me, like she was calling my love for this place a sickness. "If you leave," I asked, "what happens to the ranch?" She shrugged, pulling the blanket higher around her shoulders like my question was inconvenient. "You will handle it. You always do." That was the beginning of the pattern. Marianne stepped back, me stepping forward, not because I was stronger, but because someone had to keep the lights on. Someone had to fix the broken pipe when the well pump froze in January. Someone had to sit at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes and figure out which bills could wait and which ones could not. The first year after Mom, I learned more about money than I ever wanted to know. Ranch life looks simple from the outside. People picture sunsets and horses, and a woman in a flannel shirt sipping coffee on a porch. They do not picture the spreadsheets, the permits, the insurance, the repairs that never stop. They do not picture me sitting on hold with the county office, listening to tinny music, trying to ask questions I barely understood without sounding like an idiot. There were weeks when I felt like the ranch was a hungry animal and I was the only one feeding it. I found Dad's old file cabinet in the study, stuffed with paperwork he had kept for years. Receipts, contracts, notes written in his messy handwriting. I sat on the floor and sorted through it all, my knees aching, my eyes burning from staring at tiny print. I wanted to call Dad and ask him what a particular form meant. I wanted to hear him say, "Calm down, kiddo, it's not that complicated." But all I had was silence and my own stubbornness. Slowly, I got better at it. I found an accountant in town who did not treat me like a child. I learned how to track expenses. I learned what needed fixing now and what could wait until spring. I learned the difference between being sentimental and being reckless. I learned how to keep going even when my chest felt like it had a stone inside. That is the part people do not see when they assume I stayed because I had nowhere else to go. I stayed because I refused to let the last thing my family built fall apart. Marianne moved to Denver. At first, she called often. She would tell me about her apartment, her job, the restaurants she loved. Her voice would lift when she talked about city life, like she was finally breathing again. She would ask about the ranch the way you ask about an old neighbor. How is it out there? Still quiet. Still the same. Over time, the calls got shorter, then less frequent, then mostly limited to holidays, birthdays. Occasional texts with a heart emoji that felt like a placeholder for real care. Sometimes she would come back for a weekend. She would step out of her car in clean boots that had never touched mud, look at the house and sigh. She always sighed, like the ranch offended her just by existing. She would walk through the rooms and say things like, "It smells like old wood," or "It's so dark in here," or "You should really update this place." She would say it lightly, but it landed like criticism every time. I would swallow my irritation and remind myself she was grieving in her own way, that she was doing what she had to do to survive, that she was my sister and we had already lost too much. That night after the wedding, driving back from Jackson Hole, I told myself the same thing. Marianne had been stressed. Weddings make people weird. She had said something awful, but maybe she had not meant it the way it sounded. Maybe she had been embarrassed by me. Maybe she had been trying to impress people. None of it was fair, but I could still explain it if I tried. I finished the morning chores and walked back toward the house. The sun had finally cleared the ridge, turning the snow on the distant peaks pale pink. It was beautiful in a quiet way that never asked for attention. Inside, I washed my hands at the sink and stared at the soap bubbles circling the drain. My phone sat on the counter, dark and silent. No new messages, no missed calls, nothing. I told myself I was relieved. I told myself it was better not to hear from Marianne right away. I told myself the wedding was a single ugly moment in a long, complicated relationship and it would pass. Then I dried my hands, took the keys from my pocket, and hung them back on the hook by the door the way I always did. The metal clicked softly against the wood. Small sound, ordinary sound. I stood there a second longer than I needed to, listening to it. After everything that happened last night, I still believed this would blow over. I still believed my sister would wake up, feel ashamed, and call me to apologize. I still believed family at the end of the day meant something stronger than pride. I turned off the kitchen light and walked toward the hallway, already making a mental list of what I needed to do before noon, as if keeping busy could keep my heart from thinking too hard. I checked the weather on my phone, then the ranch calendar on the fridge, then the feed inventory scribbled on a notepad by the sink. Ordinary things, safe things. The kind of routine that usually calmed me down. The phone rang anyway. It startled me so hard I almost dropped the notepad. The sound cut through the quiet house like a blade. I stared at the screen and felt my stomach tighten. Marianne. For a second I considered letting it go to voicemail. Not out of spite, out of self-protection. I did not trust my voice. I did not trust what might come out of my mouth if I heard hers again. But the call kept ringing steady and insistent, and something inside me, that old reflex from when we were girls and I would always answer for her, made my thumb slide across the screen. Hello? Her voice came out bright clipped like she was making a work call. No softness, no hesitation. Like last night had been a quick weather event that had passed and did not need mentioning. Layla. I need the ranch keys. For a moment, my brain did not process the words. It was like she had spoken in a language I did not know. Then they landed. Heavy, out of place. I gripped the edge of the counter with my free hand. The ranch keys. I glanced at the hook by the back door where they usually hung. They were not there because they were in my pocket, right where I had put them after chores. I felt their weight through the fabric of my jeans, suddenly aware of them in a way I never was before. What I said, and my voice sounded too calm, like it belonged to someone else. What do you mean you need them? There was a pause, just long enough for me to hear muffled sounds on her end. Voices movement, a faint clink like a glass set down on a table. For the paperwork, she said. For planning. We have things to handle now that the wedding is over. Planning for what? Another pause. Her breath came through the phone, impatient. You know, she said like I was slow. The ranch stuff. We need access. We need to start making changes. The word hit me like a warning bell. My mind flashed to her face last night, cold and decided. Apologize or get out. We do not want you here. This morning she was not asking why I left. She was not apologizing. She was asking for keys, like she was asking me to forward her mail. Marianne. I said carefully. What are you talking about? She sighed, the same way she used to sigh when we were teenagers, and I asked her to clean her room. Layla, stop making this dramatic. We just need the keys so we can come by and take a look at the place. We need to meet with someone, and we need to be able to get in without waiting on you. Meet with someone. The skin on the back of my neck prickled. My eyes drifted to the study door down the hall, closed quiet. Dad's old file cabinet was in there, Mom's papers, the trust documents I kept in a locked drawer. Things I did not let anyone handle casually, not even family, because the world does not care who you love when it comes time to take something from you. Why would you need to get in without me, I asked. Because you are always busy, Marianne snapped. And then she softened her tone like she realized she sounded harsh. Because you are always running around with chores and animals and whatever. I am trying to make this easier, Layla. Easier for who? For everyone, she said. For you too, if you would stop being stubborn. We need to do some remodeling. Nothing major. Just updates, paperwork. Maybe talk to a contractor. Maybe talk to the county about permits. Permits. I felt my mouth go dry. That was not a casual word. That was not a paint color and some throw pillows. That was structural. That was official. That was money. That was intent. Marianne, I said I need you to slow down and tell me what you mean. Remodeling what? The main house, she said. The entryway. The kitchen, maybe the guest rooms. It is outdated. You know it is. We want to modernize. The old familiar word. Modernize. She had said it so many times over the years, like it was a magic spell that would fix everything she did not like about her past. I swallowed. My hands were cold. You just got married last night. Why are you talking about my kitchen? Because it is not just your kitchen, she said, and there it was a sharper edge beneath her voice. It is family property. We need to treat it like it matters. It does matter, I said, and my voice rose before I could stop it. It matters to me because I live here. I work here. I pay for it. I keep it running. Marianne huffed as if I were being unreasonable. Layla, it is not about you playing ranch queen. It is about moving forward. I cannot believe we are doing this the day after my wedding. My wedding. She said it like a shield. Like I was not allowed to question anything today because she had worn white last night. Like she had earned the right to take whatever she wanted because she had. Stood under lights and smiled for cameras. I pressed my fingers to my forehead and tried to keep my voice steady. Last night you told me to apologize or get out. You told me you did not want me there, in front of everyone. And now you are calling me like nothing happened, asking for keys. Silence. Not stunned silence, not guilty silence, strategic silence. The kind of silence that buys time to decide what story to tell. Layla, she finally said, you know why I said that? I felt my stomach drop. Do I? You have been cold to me for months, she said. You barely said a word during the engagement. You never once acted happy for me. You always look at me like I am doing something wrong. And you did it again last night. You walked in and stood there with that face like you were judging me. My throat tightened. That is what you think I did. That is what you did, she insisted. And it is exhausting. I was not going to let you ruin my day. I stared out the window at the pasture, the grass catching the morning sun. I could see Dakota's shadow moving near the fence. Everything out there felt real, solid, honest. The conversation in my ear felt like smoke. I did not ruin your day, I said quietly. I stood in the back. I did not talk to anyone. I did not say anything. I did not even come up to you. Exactly, she snapped. You did not. You made it obvious you did not care. My chest tightened. So you wanted me to pretend. I wanted you to support me, Layla. Like a sister. Like family. I wanted you to stop acting like you are the only one who has a claim to the ranch and the only one who knows what is best. There it was again. The ranch. Always the ranch. It was never just about feelings. It was always tied to land to control, to who got to decide what counted as home. Marianne, I said I am not doing this over the phone. What exactly are you asking me for? The keys, she said again, slower, as if speaking to a child. I need the ranch keys. I heard another voice in the background, then low close to the phone. A man's voice. Calm, confidence. It's just practical. The words slid in like someone slipping a knife into a drawer, quiet and deliberate. I did not need to ask who it was. My whole body went rigid. I could picture him, standing near her, hand on her back the way it was at the wedding, leaning in with that controlled smile, using the same tone you use when you're explaining something obvious to someone you think is emotional. Marianne did not correct him. She did not tell him to stop. She let him speak like he belonged in the conversation about my home. My voice came out thin. Is he there? Marianne hesitated, then said yes. Like she was annoyed, I asked. We are together. We are talking about our future, about what makes sense. I closed my eyes. The headache that had been lurking behind my temples all morning suddenly flared. You are calling me less than 12 hours after your wedding, I said, and you are asking for keys to my house, and he is telling you it is practical. Layla, do not start, Marianne warned. Start what? Start acting like we are taking something from you, she said. We are not. We just need access. We need to get the paperwork going. We need to meet a contractor. We need to get estimates. It is not a big deal unless you make it one. I felt the keys in my pocket again, that solid little weight. My mind ran through everything I knew, everything I had learned the hard way. The trust paperwork, the responsibility, the fact that even though Marianne had a share as a beneficiary, she was not the one who handled the day-to-day. She was not the one who had spent nights awake worrying about whether the well pump would last another season. Most of all, she was not the one who lived here. This was not a vacation home. This was not a trophy. This was my life. Marianne, I said I need you to explain why you need physical keys. You have never needed them before. When you visit, I am here. The doors are open. You walk in like you always have. Why now? She let out a sound that was half laugh, half scoff. Because now I am married. Because things are changing. Because I am not going to keep asking permission to access family property. Access for what, Marianne? Tell me, are you planning to move in? No, she said too quickly. That is not the point. Then what is the point? Another pause. Then her voice turned sharper. The point is, you are not the only one with a say anymore. You have been acting like you own the place and you do not. You have been acting like you get to decide everything and you do not. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I leaned against the counter because my knees suddenly felt unsteady. I did decide some things, I said, and I forced my voice to stay calm. Because I am the one managing it. I am the one paying bills. I am the one keeping it from falling apart. That is exactly the problem, Marianne snapped. You think you are the hero. You think you are a martyr. You are not. You are just stubborn. You are stuck. You are clinging to a life that is already gone. Clinging. The word stung. I pictured Mom polishing this table, Dad leaning against the doorway in his work shirt, smiling at us like we were his whole world. Clinging was what you called someone who refused to move on, not someone who kept a promise. Marianne, I said, and my voice shook despite my effort. I needed time. I am not handing over keys today. Not like this. not without knowing exactly what you are doing. On the other end, I heard her inhale sharply, like I had slapped her back. You are unbelievable, she said. It is always about control with you. No, I said. It is about clarity. You want access, you want remodeling, you want contractors. That is not nothing. That is not casual. That is my home. It is family property, she repeated, and her voice rose. Stop saying my home like you are the only one who lost dad and mom. Stop acting like the ranch is your identity. I flinched. Not because she was wrong about the identity part, but because she had finally said what she really thought. That the ranch was not my life. It was my obsession. My excuse. My cage. I took a slow breath. I could feel my hands trembling. I forced them to still by pressing my palm flat against the counter. I am not saying you did not lose them, I said. I am saying I stayed. I stayed when you left. I stayed when it was hard. I stayed when there was no one else. That is not control, Marianne. That is my responsibility. Silence again. And then the man's voice, closer now, firm and polite in a way that made my skin crawl. Layla, we are trying to help you. I did not answer him. I kept my focus on my sister. Marianne, I said I will call you back. Not today, but soon. I need to look at paperwork. I need to think. You have had years to think, she shot back. Maybe, I said quietly, but I have not had years to watch you turn into someone who talks to me like this. I hung up before she could respond. The house was quiet again, but it did not feel peaceful. It felt like the quiet after a door slams. A new kind of silence, sharp and waiting. I stood there for a long moment, phone in my hand, eyes fixed on nothing. Then I slid the phone onto the counter and reached into my pocket. I pulled out the keys and held them in my palm. They were warm from my body heat, ordinary little pieces of metal, but my hand would not stop shaking. I walked to the back door and looked out at the ranch. The pasture, the barn, the line of fence disappearing toward the ridge. Everything looked exactly the way it always did, like it had no idea what had just started. And that was when it hit me clear and cold. The wedding was not the end of our tension. It was the opening move. That thought settled into me as the morning wore on, heavy and unwelcome. I went through the motions of the day without really being in it. I refilled the water troughs, checked the south fence line, and answered an email from the feed supplier. My body did what it always did, but my mind stayed locked on that one word Caleb had slipped into the call, like it was nothing. Practical. It did not sound cruel. It did not sound aggressive. That was the danger of it. Practical was the kind of word that made people nod along without asking what it really meant. It was the word people used when they wanted something to seem inevitable, reasonable beyond emotion. When Caleb said it, I could hear the confidence behind it. The certainty that this was already decided, that I just had not caught up yet. As I worked, memories surfaced not of childhood this time, but of smaller moments over the past year. Conversations that had felt off at the time, but had not seemed important enough to challenge. The first time I met Caleb properly had been at a dinner Marianne insisted on, hosting when they came up from Denver one fall. He had walked the ranch with his hands in his pockets, nodding slowly as I showed him around. He asked how many acres we managed, what the maintenance costs looked like, whether I tracked expenses digitally or still used paper. I had answered politely, assuming he was just making conversation. At one point, standing near the barn, he gestured toward the pasture and said the land was underutilized. Not wasted, not neglected. Underutilized. As if it were a spreadsheet with empty cells. I remember laughing it off. Telling him ranching was not about squeezing every dollar out of the ground. He had smiled back, thin and knowing, and said efficiency did not have to be heartless. I had not known then that he was already translating my life into terms that made sense to him. Later at dinner, he talked about modern solutions, automated systems, outsourcing, streamlining. He said it all casually, like suggestions tossed into the air. Marianne listened closely, nodding, asking questions. She repeated his words back to him, trying them on like new clothes. Modern, efficient, scalable. At the time, I told myself they were just ideas. People talked big when they were in love. People imagined futures without really committing to them. I did not push back because I did not want to be the difficult sister. I did not want to prove whatever story Marianne had already started telling about me in her head. Now standing in the barn with the smell of hay and dust in my lungs, Those words felt different. They felt coordinated. After lunch, I went back into the house and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I pulled up old emails, the ones I rarely read but never deleted. Dad had not been much for technology, but toward the end, when his hands were too unsteady to write long letters, he had learned to type short messages. One email in particular had always stayed with me. It was dated early spring, not long before he got sick enough that the ranch stopped being a conversation and started being a worry. He had written about pressure from outside, developers asking questions, neighbors selling off pieces of land to people who did not live here, who saw open space as opportunity instead of responsibility. He had warned me that words like improvement and modernization were not always what they seemed. People will tell you it is practical, he wrote. That is how they make it sound harmless. But once you hand over control, you do not get it back. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. At the time, I had thought he was just being cautious. Protective in that way dads are when they know they are leaving too soon. Now it felt like he had been talking directly to the moment I was standing in. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, listening to the quiet of the house. The old floor creaked as the temperature shifted. The clock ticked steadily on the wall. Everything here moved at a pace that did not ask permission from anyone. My phone buzzed with a new email notification. For a split second, my heart jumped, expecting Marianne. Instead, it was a forwarded message from an address I did not recognize. The name attached to it made my stomach tighten. Daniel Brooks. The subject line was neutral. Property documentation inquiry. I did not open it right away. I sat there staring at the screen, the name sinking in. Daniel Brooks was the attorney Dad had worked with when he set up the trust. He was not family. He was not someone Marianne should have been contacting without looping me in. When I finally opened the email, it was brief and carefully worded. Daniel introduced himself, referenced his prior work with my family, and asked if I had time to discuss some questions regarding access and future planning for the ranch. He mentioned that he had been contacted by Marianne regarding next steps after her marriage. There was no accusation in the email, no pressure, just an implication. Things were moving whether I participated or not. I read it twice, then a third time, my jaw tight. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not wedding stress. This was a process. The language was familiar now. Access, planning, next steps, practical. I pushed my chair back and stood up, suddenly restless. I walked through the house, touching the backs of chairs, the edge of the counter, grounding myself in the physical space. This was where Dad had leaned after long days, where Mom had laughed when flour dusted her nose. It was not perfect. It was not efficient. It was real. The more I thought about it, the clearer the pattern became. Caleb introduced the language. Marianne adopted it. Then they moved from talk to action without stopping to ask if I agreed, assuming I would fall in line the way I always had. Because you will handle it, you always do. That sentence echoed in my head, not as an insult this time, but as a strategy. They were counting on my sense of responsibility to keep me from resisting, counting on me not wanting conflict, counting on me to smooth things over. I sat back down and typed a short reply to Daniel Brooks, polite, non-committal. I thanked him for reaching out and said I would be in touch after reviewing the relevant documents. I did not offer a time. I did not offer access. I did not apologize. When I hit send, my hands were steady. That surprised me. As the afternoon stretched on, I replayed conversations with Marianne through this new lens. The way she had started saying our ranch instead of your ranch when talking to friends. The way she deflected when I asked about their plans, always vague, always future-focused. The way she bristled when I mentioned boundaries, as if the concept itself were an insult. I had thought we were navigating grief differently, that she needed distance and I needed closeness, that neither approach was wrong. I saw now that it was more than that. We were not just grieving differently. We were valuing different things entirely. By early evening, clouds had rolled in, flattening the light outside. I turned on a lamp in the living room and sat with a notebook, jotting down what I knew, what I did not, and what questions needed answers. It felt like overkill for a family issue, but this was no longer just family. Caleb did not love this place. He loved what it could become. Marianne loved the idea of leaving behind what hurt her, even if it meant discarding what had held us together. And I loved the ranch, not because it was perfect, but because it was ours, flawed and stubborn and still standing. I thought about calling Marianne back, about trying one more time to talk it through calmly. But every version of that conversation in my head ended the same way, with me explaining myself and her hearing only resistance. I closed the notebook and stood up. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows lightly. The ranch did not care about practicality. It responded to care, to presence, to time. As I turned off the lamp and headed toward the hallway, a hard truth settled into me, one I could no longer avoid. This was not a family misunderstanding that could be fixed with an apology or a cooling-off period. This was a coordinated push wrapped in reasonable language, backed by confidence and paperwork. And if I did not get very clear about where I stood, someone else was going to decide for me. I paused at the doorway to the study, hand resting on the frame, listening to the wind outside. For the first time since the wedding, I did not feel confused. I felt alert, and I knew that whatever came next would require more than patience. They arrived 2 days later, just before noon, when the sun was high enough to flatten the shadows and make everything look calmer than it felt. I was in the yard checking the irrigation line when I heard the sound of tires on gravel, not the steady rumble of a ranch truck. Something lighter, newer. I straightened and watched as Marianne's car came into view, clean and polished like it did not belong on this road. Caleb was driving. I did not wave. I did not hide. I simply stood there and waited. They stepped out together, moving in sync the way couples do when they are still trying to prove something to the world. Marianne wore sunglasses and a fitted jacket, city clothes that looked stiff against the wide open space. Caleb looked relaxed, almost pleased, like he was arriving at a meeting he expected to win. "Layla," Marianne said, forcing brightness into her voice as she walked toward me. "We thought it would be better to talk in person." Better for who, I wondered, but I did not say it out loud. We went inside, past the kitchen, and into the living room. Marianne perched on the edge of the couch, like she was ready to leave at any moment. Caleb stayed standing, hands loosely clasped, eyes moving around the room in that assessing way I had come to recognize. He took in the furniture, the shelves, the windows, not with curiosity, but with calculation. "This place has so much potential," he said casually, nodding toward the ceiling beams. "You could really open it up." Marianne shot him a look, then turned back to me. We are not here to criticize," she said quickly. "We just want to have an honest conversation." I crossed my arms more to steady myself than to shut them out. "Then be honest." For a few minutes they were careful. Marianne talked about how hard the wedding had been, how overwhelmed she felt, how she wished things had gone differently between us. She said she missed me. She said she wanted us to be close again. Caleb nodded along, occasionally adding a word about family unity, about wanting what was best for everyone. It almost worked. Almost. Then the language shifted, subtle at first. Marianne started saying things like, "You have carried this for so long, and maybe it is time to let others help." Caleb talked about burden, about sustainability, about the long term. He spoke calmly, confidently, like a man explaining something obvious. "You are holding everyone back," he said, finally looking straight at me. The words landed hard, even though his tone stayed smooth. "Holding us back?" I asked. "From moving forward," Marianne said, her voice rising just a little. "From building a future. From not being stuck in the past." I felt my jaw tighten. This again. Caleb stepped in as if to soften the blow. "Layla, think about it. You are doing all of this alone. The upkeep, the taxes, the stress. It is not fair to you. It is not practical." Practical. The word echoed through me like a warning siren. "And what exactly is your solution?" I asked. He spread his hands. "Options. There are other options. We could renovate. We could rent parts of the property. We could partner with people who know what they are doing. Turn this into something that actually works." "Works for who?" "For the family," Marianne snapped. "For me. For Caleb. For the children we want to have." Children. The word hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw the calculation behind her eyes. This was not just about land. This was about leverage. I took a slow breath. "I am not handing over the keys. You are acting like you own everything." "I am acting like I live here," I said. "Because I do." Caleb's smile thinned. "No one is saying you do not. We are just saying that there are other ways to handle things. And if you will not work with us, we may have to explore those. In other ways, I repeated. Marianne stood up, her patience snapping. You are selfish, Layla. You always have been. You hide behind responsibility so you do not have to let go. I felt the sting, but I did not rise to it. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply shook my head. You are asking me to give up control of my home without telling me exactly what you plan to do with it. That is not family. That is pressure. Caleb glanced at Marianne, then back at me. We are trying to avoid making this difficult. The threat was there, now no longer hidden behind polite language. I opened the front door and stepped aside. This conversation is over. They stared at me, stunned. Marianne looked like she wanted to scream. Caleb looked like he was already adjusting his strategy. We will talk again, Marianne said tightly. I am sure we will, I replied. After they left, the house felt smaller, tighter, like the walls had leaned in to listen. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, replaying every word. Family should not sound like a threat. But it did, and I knew deep down that this was far from over. Chapter 6. And I knew deep down that this was far from over. The email arrived 3 mornings later, tucked between a feed invoice and a reminder from the county about water usage. Reporting. At first glance, it looked harmless enough. The subject line reads, Requests for clarification. The sender was a law firm based in Denver. I did not recognize the name, but something in my chest tightened before I even opened it. I read it slowly once, then again. The tone was polite, almost friendly. The kind of writing that pretends it is doing you a favor by explaining something you apparently do not understand. The sender introduced himself as Andrew Collins, legal counsel for my sister Marianne and her husband Caleb. He wrote that his clients were seeking clarity regarding shared assets and future planning. He emphasized that no action was being taken at this time. This was simply a request for information. Simply. He mentioned a few terms that jumped off the screen and refused to let go. Partition, asset deterioration, capacity. I closed my laptop and sat there staring at the kitchen wall, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The house felt different now, quieter but not peaceful, like it was holding its breath. Lawyers do not raise their voices. They do not need to. They choose words carefully and let those words do the damage. I forwarded the email to Daniel Brooks with a short note asking if he had time to talk. He called me back that afternoon. His voice was calm, steady, but there was a weight to it that had not been there before. This is how it starts, he said. They frame it as a concern. They use neutral language, but those terms are not neutral. He explained them one by one, not like a lecture, but like a warning. Partition meant forcing a division of property if co-owners could not agree. Asset deterioration meant arguing that the property was losing value under current management. Capacity meant questioning whether I was mentally fit to make decisions. I felt a chill move through me. You think they would do that? Daniel did not answer right away. When he did, his voice was careful. I have seen families do worse over less. He told me that Andrew Collins was known for being thorough, not aggressive in the loud way, but persistent, strategic. The kind of attorney who laid groundwork quietly and waited for people to trip over it themselves. They are building a record, Daniel said. Every email, every refusal, every delay. It can all be framed as unreasonable if they want it to be. I thought about Marianne standing in my living room, calling me selfish. Caleb talking about other options. The way they had shifted from conversation to pressure without ever saying what they were really willing to do. What do? I asked. First, Daniel said you stop thinking this is still a family disagreement. Second, you protect yourself. Protect myself. He paused. Get ahead of the capacity issue. That one is dangerous because it feels personal. It is not about facts. It is about perception. I swallowed. You think they will try to say I am not capable. I think they will say you are overwhelmed, stressed, too emotionally attached to make rational decisions. It sounds kinder than calling someone unfit, but it leads to the same place. After we hung up, I sat at the table for a long time, my hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. Outside, the sky had turned that pale, washed-out blue that comes before snow. Everything looked fragile. I called my primary care clinic and asked for the first available appointment. When the receptionist asked why I hesitated, then told the truth. I needed a full evaluation, physical and cognitive. I needed documentation. 2 days later, I sat in a small exam room with paper on the table and a blood pressure cuff, squeezing my arm. Rachel Moore came in with a warm smile and a clipboard tucked against her hip. She had been my doctor for years. She knew my history. She knew my parents. She knew the ranch. "What brings you in?" she asked. I told her everything, not just about the lawyers, but about the wedding, the phone call, the pressure. I told her I needed to be sure, not for them, for me. She listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. When I finished, she nodded once. "All right, let us take our time." The tests were thorough. Memory, attention, problem solving, basic physical checks. Questions that felt almost insulting until I reminded myself why I was there. Rachel never rushed me. She explained what she was doing and why. She asked about my sleep, my stress, and my daily routine. At one point, she looked at me over her glasses and said, "You are dealing with a lot, but that does not mean you are incapable. It means you are human." When it was over, she printed the report and signed it. Her handwriting was firm, decisive. No ambiguity, no hedging. "You are fully competent," she said. "Cognitively intact, physically healthy. There is nothing here that would support a claim otherwise." I felt something loosen in my chest, something I had not realized I was holding so tightly. "Thank you." She hesitated at the door, then turned back. "Be careful, Layla. People do not question capacity unless they want something you are standing in the way of." That night I scanned the report and sent it to Daniel. He replied with a single line, "Good. This helps." But relief did not come. Not really. Because I understood something now that I had not before. This was not about winning an argument. This was about wearing someone down, making them doubt themselves, making them afraid to stand firm. The law was not here to protect feelings. It was here to sort assets. And assets did not care about history or grief or promises made to parents who were no longer alive. I thought about Dad again, about the way he used to say that people show you who they are when there is something to gain. I had always believed he meant strangers, developers, outsiders. I was wrong. Late that evening, another email came in. This one from Andrew Collins again. Polite, professional. He acknowledged receipt of my earlier response and reiterated his client's desire to resolve matters amicably. He suggested a meeting. Neutral ground. No pressure? I did not reply. I stood at the back door and looked out at the darkened pasture. The wind had picked up, bending the grass in waves. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out sharp and lonely. This was not a shouting match. This was not a family fight that could be fixed with an apology. This was a cold war fought with documents and implications and quiet threats. And for the first time, I understood exactly what I was up against. The next request did not come by email. It came with tires on gravel and the quiet confidence of people who believed. Paperwork made them untouchable. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where the wind smells like dry grass and the sky looks wide enough to swallow you whole. I was in the kitchen kneading dough for biscuits, more out of muscle memory than appetite when I heard the engine. I wiped my hands on a towel and looked out the window. Marianne's car again. Caleb drives again. I did not feel surprised this time. I felt my body go still, the way it does right before a storm hits and the air changes. I set the towel down, slowly walked to the front door, and opened it before they could knock. I would not let them control the rhythm of my house. Marianne stepped out first. Her hair was pulled back, her face bare or at least close to it, and her eyes were already shiny, like she had been crying in the car. Caleb came around the driver's side, jaw-tight posture stiff. He did not look at the house the way he usually did, like it was a project. He looked at it like it was an obstacle. "Layla," Marianne said, and her voice cracked on my name. "Please, can we talk?" I took one step back and let them in, not because I wanted them there, but because I did not want a scene in the yard where the neighbors might notice. Out here, people pretend not to watch each other, but they do. They watch everything. We went into the living room. The light from the windows fell across the old rug, across the chair where Mom used to sit with her knitting, across the shelves where Dad's worn books still leaned together like old friends. Marianne hovered near the couch, twisting her fingers. Caleb stayed standing again, like he could not bear to sit in a room that did not belong to him. I waited. Marianne took a shaky breath. I am sorry about the wedding, she said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. I should not have said what I said. I was overwhelmed. I was stressed. I felt like you hated me. I blinked slowly. It was the closest thing to an apology I had heard, but it landed wrong. It sounded rehearsed, shaped to lead somewhere. I did not hate you, I said. I was hurt. There is a difference. She nodded hard, like she wanted to accept that and move past it in the same second. Exactly. And that is why I am here. I do not want us to be like this. We are sisters. We have only each other left. Only each other left. The words should have softened me. They should have made my throat tighten with memory and shared grief. Instead, I felt wary, because every time Marianne reached for our history lately, it was to pull me towards something I did not want. Caleb exhaled through his nose, impatient. Marianne. She glanced at him, then back at me. There is more, she said. I did not tell you before because I was scared you would shut down. But you deserve to know. We are going to have a baby. The room went quiet in a way that felt unreal. My mind tried to reject the sentence as if it had been spoken in the wrong house to the wrong person. Then my eyes dropped to her midsection. Nothing obvious. If she was early, it would not show. A baby, I repeated, and my voice came out thin. Marianne nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks now. Yes, we found out right before the wedding. I wanted to tell you in a sweet way like sisters do, but everything got so ugly so fast. My chest tightened with something complicated, a flicker of joy, because the idea of a child in our family should have been a blessing. A flicker of grief because the moment had been stolen from us. And underneath it all, the ugly awareness that she had not come here to share happiness. She had come here with a strategy. Congratulations, I said quietly. Truly. She pressed a hand to her mouth and let out a small sob, like she had been holding her breath for permission to feel something good. Thank you. I knew you would understand. Understand what I wondered, but I did not say it. Caleb finally spoke, and his voice had that smooth edge again, the one that pretended kindness while it pushed. This changes things, Layla. It is not just us making plans anymore. It is our child, your niece or nephew, family. The word felt different coming from him, like a tool. Marianne stepped closer, palms open. We are not trying to take anything from you. We are trying to make sure we can build a stable life. I do not want to raise a baby in a tiny apartment forever. I do not want to worry about money. I do not want Caleb to be stressed. We want to be able to come here to use the ranch, to make it work for all of us. Make it work, I repeated because the phrase was familiar now. She nodded eagerly. Yes, like a venue sometimes, or small retreats, or even just updates so it is safe and comfortable. The kitchen, the bathrooms, the wiring, you know it is old. It could be dangerous. What if there is a fire? What if you trip? What if something happens and no one is here? We are worried about you too. There it was. Concern shaped like pressure. Love shaped like a leash. I kept my voice calm. If you are worried about me, you can call. You can visit. You can ask how I'm doing. You do not need renovation plans to care about me. Marianne flinched, then tried again. Layla, please. I am begging you. I cannot do this without you. I cannot have my baby growing up with us fighting. I need you to meet us halfway. Halfway to where? Caleb's patience snapped just slightly like a thread breaking. We have been meeting you halfway, he said. You refuse to see reality. This property is sitting here doing nothing while you grind yourself into the ground. It is irresponsible. I looked at him. It is my responsibility. He took a step forward close enough that I could see the tension in his jaw. No, it is a shared responsibility. And you are not acting like a partner. You are acting like a gatekeeper. A gatekeeper. The word was meant to shame me. To make me sound petty. Like I was guarding something that did not belong to me. Marianne's tears flowed faster. He is right, Layla. You keep the doors closed. You keep us outside. You make everything hard. You are holding everyone back. The sentence hit with a dull thud, because it was exactly what I had known they believed. Hearing it from my sister through tears made it worse. I stared at her for a long moment. She looked scared. She looked exhausted. She looked like she had convinced herself that I was the villain in her story, because the alternative would mean admitting she was letting someone else Steer her life. I spoke softly. Holding you back from what? From the future, she said, voice breaking. From a chance. From stability. From not repeating what happened to us. We lost Dad. We lost Mom. I do not want to lose everything else because you cannot let go. Let go. Of what? Of the ranch. Of my home. Of the only thing that had not left me. Caleb cut in, voice sharper now. Enough. We are done with the emotions. Hand over the keys. Marianne's head snapped toward him. Caleb, please. He did not look at her. He kept his eyes on me. We have tried. We have asked nicely. We have explained. You are choosing to be difficult. Give her the keys, Marianne said quietly, and my sister's voice suddenly sounded small. It will make this easier. I felt something go cold inside me. There it was, the moment where she stopped being my sister speaking to me and became a messenger for him. I reached into my pocket and felt the keys there, solid and warm. For one strange second, I imagined what it would be like to hand them over, to end the tension, to see Marianne's shoulders relax, to hear Caleb's tone soften, to pretend peace could be purchased with metal and access. Then I imagined what would happen next. Contractors, estimates, strangers walking through Dad's study, decisions made in Denver offices. My sister smiled tightly while my life got repackaged into something profitable. And I imagined the day I would stand in this same living room, watching people carry out furniture that had belonged to our family for generations, being told it was just practical. I stayed silent. The room held its breath with me. Marianne whispered my name again, pleading, Layla. Caleb's voice hardened. Now. I took a deep breath. Not the shaky kind. The kind you take when you choose something and you do not plan to revisit it. Then I said 4 words. Not getting these keys. The air changed instantly. It was like someone had turned off the music in a crowded room. Marianne froze her mouth open, tears clinging to her lashes. Caleb stared at me, and for the first time, the polite mask slipped far enough that I saw what was underneath. Disbelief first, then irritation, then something colder. You cannot be serious, he said. I nodded once. I am serious. Marianne shook her head as if she could shake my answer loose. Layla, please. You do not understand. This is for the baby. I looked at her gently, because the baby was real and innocent and deserved gentleness even if the adults did not. I understand exactly what you're doing, and I am still saying no. Caleb let out a short, humorless laugh. Fine. He turned to Marianne. I told you. She flinched at his tone, then turned back to me, her face twisting with anger now that begging had failed. You are unbelievable. You would rather live in this dusty old house alone than help your own sister. I kept my voice low. I would rather keep my boundaries than hand my life over to someone who treats it like an investment. Caleb stepped closer. You think you are protecting something. You are just being stubborn, maybe I said. But being stubborn is not illegal. His eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped into something controlled and dangerous. Then we will do this another way. Marianne looked at him, startled. What do you mean? Caleb did not answer her. He kept his gaze on me. You are making a mistake. I held his stare. Maybe, but it is mine to make. Marianne's breathing turned ragged and she wiped her cheeks roughly. Furious now. You are destroying this family. No, I said softly. I am refusing to be bulldozed by it. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint tick of the clock and the wind pressing against the windows. I could feel my heartbeat steady now, not frantic. I could feel the keys in my pocket like an anchor. Caleb finally moved toward the door, impatient. Already done with the performance. Come on, Marianne. My sister hesitated, looking at me like she was seeing a stranger. Then she walked after him, shoulders tight, face closed. At the doorway, she turned back once. You are going to regret this, she said. I did not answer. I just watched her leave. Their car backed out onto the gravel tires, crunching, then disappeared down the road. The dust rose behind them and drifted slowly, settling back onto the land like nothing had happened. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the wood for a long moment. My hands were not shaking anymore. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel cruel. I felt something simpler and stronger. I felt done. And as I stood there in the quiet, I knew the next move would not come with tears or family speeches. It would come with paper. Paper did come. Not the next day, not even the next week. But it arrived the way winter arrives out here. Quiet at first, then all at once. Until you look up and realize the whole world has shifted. The first letter showed up in late spring, tucked into my mailbox like it belonged there. A formal notice from Andrew Collins. Calm language. Firm intent. It described attempts to resolve matters amicably. It referenced my refusal to grant access and framed it as an obstacle to family planning. It mentioned the possibility of partition again, and it used the phrase asset deterioration like it was describing a leaking. Roof not a living home. Daniel Brooks and I handled the paperwork. We responded. We documented everything. We stayed polite, consistent, and unshakable. The law moved slowly like it always does, and that slowness was both a blessing and a torture. There were weeks when nothing happened, and I almost convinced myself Caleb had moved on. Then another letter would arrive, reminding me that quiet does not mean peace. By the time summer faded into fall, I learned to live with the pressure the way you live with a distant thunderstorm. You hear it. You know it is there. But you still have to feed the animals and fix the fence and keep the lights on. Karma does not hurry. It does not storm in with fireworks and applause. Sometimes it just waits for people to trip over their own choices. The first moment I saw it, really saw it, happened in town on a bright October morning. I was at the hardware store picking up a new gate latch and a coil of wire when I noticed the commotion near the front counter. A man in a crisp jacket was gesturing too hard with his hands, voice sharp enough that people started pretending they were browsing so they could listen without looking like they were listening. It took me a second to recognize him because I had never seen him without his calm mask. Caleb. His hair looked the same. His clothes looked expensive, but his face was flushed and his mouth was pulled tight with frustration. The clerk behind the counter, a young guy with tired eyes, kept shaking his head. "Sir, I cannot refund special orders after the window," the clerk said, keeping his voice even. Caleb slapped a hand on the counter. "This is ridiculous. I was told it would be delivered." "It was not. I have deadlines." The clerk did not flinch. "I understand, but it is not our policy. The materials were ordered. They arrived. You did not pick them up." Caleb's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jump. He lowered his voice, but it was not gentler. It was more threatening. "Do you know who I am?" The clerk stared back, unimpressed. "No, sir. And that does not change policy." I stood a few aisles away, my hands around the cart handle, watching. I should have turned and left. I should have pretended I did not see him. But something kept me there. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the part of me that wanted proof that he was not untouchable. Caleb finally noticed me. His eyes flicked to mine, and for a split second, something passed across his face. Not guilt. No apology. Something closer to irritation, like I was an inconvenience even here. He turned back to the clerk, voice rising again. "Fine. I will take this higher." He stormed out, the bell over the door jangling too brightly behind him. The clerk exhaled and muttered something under his breath. A woman near me shook her head and whispered to her friend that some people thought money meant they could rewrite reality. I pushed my cart forward, pretending my heart was not thumping. I checked out quickly and loaded my supplies into the truck. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw Caleb in his car, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing angrily at the windshield like the world was arguing back. That was the first crack. Small but real. A week later, the second moment came, and it was not in town. It was right here on my porch, where the air always smells like earth and old wood and the faint sweetness of hay. It was early evening. The sun was dropping behind the ridge, and the sky had that soft gold wash that made everything look kinder. I was on the porch steps with a mug of tea when I heard a vehicle. Not Marianne's car this time, a rideshare. I recognized the way the driver stopped at the end of the driveway and waited, like he was nervous about being on private property. Marianne climbed out. She looked tired. Not just stressed. Worn down. Her hair was pulled back, but loose strands had fallen out. Her cheeks were pale, and her eyes were rimmed red like she had been crying for hours. She held her phone in her hand the way people do when it is the only thing, making them feel connected to the world. She walked up the steps slowly as if she was not sure she was allowed. I stood tea still in my hand. Marianne. She swallowed and her voice came out rough. Hi. For a moment we just stared at each other. Sisters but not close. Familiar but foreign. I stepped aside and let her in without thinking. Not because I had forgiven everything, but because she looked like someone who had run out of places to go. She sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Mom used to sit. Her eyes flicked around the room like she was seeing it differently now. Not as a burden, not as a graveyard, but as something steady she had once belonged to. I set a glass of water in front of her and waited. She did not drink it. She stared at her hands. Then she said very quietly, "He is losing it." I blinked. Caleb. She nodded and tears filled her eyes again faster than she could stop them. Everything is falling apart. The project he was counting on, the one he kept talking about, is not happening. I sat across from her. What a project. Marianne let out a bitter laugh. Plan. He told me he had people lined up that he could turn land into profit, that he knew what he was doing. He said it was just a matter of timing, but the deal fell through. I stayed silent, my heart tight. A part of me wanted to say I told you so. A bigger part of me felt sick because I had not wanted my sister to suffer. I had wanted her to wake up. Marianne rubbed her face with both hands like she was trying to wipe the whole year away. He took out a loan, Layla. Not a small one. He said it was temporary. He said we would pay it back when the plan launched. But now there is nothing to launch. There is only debt. My stomach dropped. Did you sign anything? She hesitated, then nodded. I did. I did not even read it properly. He told me it was standard. He told me I was being paranoid when I asked questions. I felt my throat tighten. The words from the wedding echoed in my mind. Apologize or get out. We do not want you here. The confidence she had had then. The way she believed he was the answer. Now she looked like someone who had been pulled under. Marianne, I said softly. Where is he? She shook her head quickly. In the car. Waiting. He made me come in and talk to you. He said if I could not convince you, he would. My chest went cold. Right on cue, I heard the crunch of gravel again. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps. Marianne's eyes widened with panic. Please, she whispered. Do not provoke him. He is not himself right now. I stood up slowly and turned toward the hallway. The keys were in my pocket as they always were. I felt their familiar weight, and instead of comfort, it gave me clarity. The front door opened without a knock. Caleb walked in like he owned the air. Layla, he said, and his voice was too smooth. We need to talk. Marianne stood up so fast her chair scraped. Caleb, stop. He ignored her. His eyes scanned the kitchen, landed on me, and held. There was something raw in them now, something impatient and desperate. His mask was still there, but it was cracking at the edges. I did not speak. I waited. He stepped closer. You have made this harder than it needed to be, he said. Marianne's voice shook. Caleb, please. He snapped his head toward her. You were supposed to handle her. You said she would come around. You said she always caves eventually. The cruelty of that sentence hung in the air. Marianne's face crumpled. I tried, she whispered. I tried. Caleb turned back to me and his voice dropped low. You do not understand how much is at stake. I met his stare. I understand more than you think. He laughed once, sharp and bitter. No, you understand cows and fences. You do not understand real pressure. My hands curled into fists at my sides. This is my home. If you are here to threaten me, you can leave. His eyes narrowed. I am here to solve a problem. Marianne stepped between us, trembling. Stop. Both of you, please. Caleb's face twisted with frustration, and for the first time, I saw something ugly and unfiltered. He looked at my sister like she was a tool that had stopped working. Karma does not hurry, I thought, watching him. But it is precise. Caleb took a step back, breathing hard. Fine, he pointed at me. This is not done. You are going to regret being so stubborn. Then he grabbed Marianne's arm, not gently, and pulled her toward the door. She stumbled, caught herself, and looked back at me, eyes full of shame and fear and something that might have been realization. I did not move. I did not chase. I did not beg her to stay. I simply stood there and let them go, because I finally understood that saving someone does not work if they keep handing their life to the wrong person. The door closed. The house went quiet again. I sat down slowly, my hands shaking now, tea forgotten on the counter. Outside, the sky darkened and the wind rose, sweeping across the pasture like a long exhale. Karma never announces itself. It just keeps showing up one consequence at a time, until the truth is impossible to ignore. And I had the feeling we were getting close. It took 3 more months before I saw my sister again. Winter had settled in by then, not gently, but with the kind of certainty that makes everything slow down, whether you want it to or not. Snow lay thick along the fence lines. The creek had frozen in places, leaving dark water moving beneath a crust of ice. The days were short, the nights long enough to feel like a test of patience. I had learned to live inside the quiet. Not the peaceful quiet people romanticize, but the honest kind. The kind that gives you room to think whether you want it or not. When Marianne came back this time, she did not arrive with confidence or demands. She did not arrive with Caleb. She arrived in a borrowed car just after dusk, headlights cutting through falling snow. I was in the barn spreading fresh bedding when I heard the engine idle. I stepped outside and pulled my coat tighter, already knowing who it would be. Some instincts never leave you. She stood by the car for a moment before walking toward me, her boots crunching on the packed snow. She looked thinner. Her face was drawn tired in a way sleep does not fix. Her jacket was practical, not fashionable, and it hung on her shoulders like it did not quite belong. I did not smile. I did not turn away. I simply waited. "Layla," she said quietly. I nodded once. "Marianne." We stood there with the barn light buzzing above us, snow drifting down in soft sheets. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Sisters who had shared a childhood grief history, now unsure how to stand in the same space. She broke first. I left him. The words were flat, almost numb. Not dramatic, not proud. Just stated. I let the breath I had been holding slip out slowly. "When? A few weeks ago," she said. "After everything blew up. After the money. After the yelling. After I realized I did not recognize myself anymore." She looked past me toward the pasture, toward the dark outline of the hills. "He said I was ungrateful. He said I ruined his plans. He said I chose you over him." I winced, not because of guilt, but because I could hear his voice in that sentence so clearly. "I did not choose you," she added, turning back to me. "I chose myself. It just took me too long to see the difference." The snow thickened, clinging to her hair. I gestured toward the house. "It is cold." She followed me inside, hesitating at the threshold like she was afraid she might not be welcome. I did not invite her in with words. I let my actions do that work. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one we had both circled our lives around in different ways. I poured tea without asking. She wrapped her hands around the mug like it was an anchor. For a while we said nothing. The house made its familiar sounds. The heater kicked on. The clock ticked. Finally she spoke. I thought loving him meant becoming someone else. Someone stronger. Someone smarter. Someone who could not be hurt. She swallowed hard. "I thought you staying here meant you were afraid. Afraid to move on. Afraid to grow up." She looked at me, then really looked. "I see now that you were the brave one. You stayed when it hurt. You did not run." The words landed with weight, not just the truth arriving late. I did not say thank you. I did not say I forgive you. I did not reach across the table. I said I needed you to respect my boundaries. That was all. She nodded, tears sliding down her face without sound. "I know." And I did not. I let him convince me that boundaries were selfish, that love meant access, control. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. I was wrong. We sat with that for a long time. Eventually, she told me about the baby. "There is a boy," she said quietly. "Noah." The name sat between us, fragile and real. "How far along?" I asked. She told me and I did the math without commenting. I asked if she was healthy, if she had support, if she was safe. She answered honestly. Yes, mostly, not completely. I did not offer solutions. I did not offer to fix anything. I listened. When she finally looked up again, her eyes were clearer. "He keeps asking about the ranch, about you, about whether I can convince you to reconsider now that things are different." I met her gaze steadily. "And what do you tell him?" She hesitated, then said, "I tell him the ranch was never the problem. It was the mirror." Something in my chest loosened at that. Not enough to erase the past. Enough to breathe. "I am not asking for keys," she said quickly. "I am not asking for access. I am not asking for anything like that. I just needed to see you, to tell you I understand now. I believed her. And I also knew belief did not mean things could go back to how they were. I am glad you are safe, I said. I am glad you left. But that does not change how things are between us. She nodded, pain flickering across her face. I know. I do not expect forgiveness. I just did not want to disappear without saying it. We talked a little longer, about practical things, about her plans, about where she might live next, about the uncertainty of raising a child alone. When she stood to leave, she lingered by the door. I used to think family meant never saying no to each other, she said. Now I think it means not destroying each other to feel secure. I did not answer right away. Then I said family means knowing where you end and someone else begins. She gave a small, sad smile. I wish I had learned that sooner. I opened the door for her. Snow swirled and cold and clean. She stepped out, then turned back one last time. I am sorry, she said. Not for the ranch. For choosing him over you. I held her gaze. I did not say it was okay. I did not say I forgive you. I said, take care of Noah. She nodded, tears returning, and walked into the snow. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of everything we had said and everything we had not. Sisters do not always come back to each other the way we imagine. Sometimes they come back changed. Sometimes they come back only part way. I stood there in the quiet house, knowing that what we had now was not reconciliation. And after that night, things finally went quiet in a way that felt earned. Winter passed the way it always does out here, slowly loosening its grip without ceremony. The snow melted off the fence lines, then the pasture, then the long stretch of dirt road that leads to the ranch. Mud season came and went. The calving season followed. Life kept moving forward, not because anyone decided it should, but because that is what life does when you stop fighting it. I spent more time alone, but I was not lonely. There is a difference I did not understand until I lived it. I woke up with the sun. I worked until my body was tired in the good way, the honest way. I cooked simple meals. I slept deeply. I stopped checking my phone every time it buzzed, because the fear that used to live there had nowhere left to land. The legal letters slowed, then stopped. Daniel confirmed what I already felt in my bones. Caleb had bigger problems now. Debt, reputation, projects that never quite recovered. People who once took his calls stopped returning them. The pressure he had tried to shift onto me had turned inward, collapsing under its own weight. Marianne did not come back again that year. We spoke occasionally, carefully. Short messages, updates about Noah, neutral ground. There was no pretending we were the same sisters we used to be. There was also no pretending we were enemies. We existed somewhere in between, held together by shared history and held apart by hard truths learned too late, and the ranch stayed. That is the part people like to frame as a victory, like I won something, like I beat them, like the land was a prize at the end of a long fight. But the ranch was never the trophy. I stood on the porch one morning in early summer, coffee in hand, watching the light move across the hills, and I finally understood what I had been protecting all along. It was not an acreage. It was not buildings or fences or mineral rights. It was the right to live my life without being pressured into erasing myself for someone else's comfort. The keys still hang by the back door. Same hook, same ring, same weight in my pocket when I carry them. They never changed. What changed was how I understood them. They were never about power. They were about responsibility. About showing up even when no one was watching. About keeping promises to people who no longer have a voice. I used to think keeping the ranch meant holding on to the past. Now I know it meant holding on to myself. I think about Dad sometimes. About the way he used to stand in the doorway at the end of the day, tired but satisfied. I think about Mom at the kitchen table humming while she worked, creating a sense of home out of nothing but attention and care. They did not leave me land. They left me a standard. And for a while I confused that standard with sacrifice. I thought being loyal meant staying quiet, letting things slide, absorbing other people's discomfort so they would not have to face it. I was wrong. Silence is not weakness when it is chosen. It is strength when it holds a boundary. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten. I did not explain myself into exhaustion. I said no when it mattered, and I let the consequences fall where they belonged. There are still moments when it hurts. Moments when I see sisters laughing together in town, or hear someone talk about family like it is always a safe place. Grief does not disappear just because you made the right choice. It changes shape. It becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you. But I do not regret what I did. I did not lose my sister because I stood my ground. I lost her when she decided access mattered more than respect. What we have now is quieter, smaller, and more honest. That is not failure. That is reality. The land outside my window does not judge me. It responds to care, not performance. It teaches patience without asking permission. It reminds me every day that growth does not come from force. It comes from time boundaries and knowing when to stop giving. What I kept was never the land. What I kept was my dignity. And that has made all the difference. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own, family, remember this: silence can be power and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.